Boston woke under a cold gray sky, the kind of morning where everything felt muted and distant. The cemetery was filled with quiet movement, black clothing, and lowered heads, but there was no sense of closure in the air. It felt more like something unfinished than something ended. Claire Dawson stood near the front row, holding a folded funeral program she no longer looked at. She was 22, a journalism student used to turning confusion into clarity through facts. But nothing about the day allowed clarity to form. Her mother, Elena Dawson, had always been seen as an ordinary woman. She worked as a librarian, lived quietly, avoided attention, and kept her life structured and private. No known enemies, no visible conflicts, nothing that suggested danger. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest. Sudden, natural, final. But Claire had already noticed inconsistencies in the medical timeline, small gaps in records, unusual timing in reports, the kind of details that did not prove anything alone but suggested something had been adjusted after the fact. During the service, Claire observed men standing apart from the crowd. They were dressed in suits, positioned at the edges of the cemetery, not interacting with any grieving family members. Their presence felt observational rather than emotional, as if they were there to monitor rather than mourn. One of them briefly shifted his attention toward Claire before looking away. Later, during the burial, a stranger approached the gravesite. He did not speak to anyone. He placed a sealed envelope near the headstone and left without explanation. No one followed him. No one acknowledged him. But Claire noticed everything. After the funeral, she returned to her mother's apartment. The silence inside felt heavier than expected. The arrangement of objects was slightly off, as if someone had recently moved through the space carefully and deliberately. In her mother's personal book collection, Claire found a hidden compartment. Inside was a small metallic key attached to a coded sequence written in Elena's handwriting. There was no explanation, only structured numbers that suggested purpose rather than randomness. That discovery changed the way Claire viewed everything she thought she knew. Her mother's life no longer looked simple. It looked divided, as if there had been more happening beneath the surface than anyone had been allowed to see. The world described Elena Dawson as an ordinary librarian, but the details Claire was finding suggested something else entirely, something carefully controlled and deliberately hidden. Claire chose not to involve authorities. Instead, she began searching quietly, aware that asking the wrong questions in the wrong place could erase the answers before she ever found them. That night, while sitting alone in her room, she held the key again and studied the code attached to it. The more she looked at it, the more certain she became that her mother had not left things behind by accident. She had left them on purpose. The Boston Public Library felt unfamiliar to Claire Dawson when she returned the next morning. The building itself had not changed. Same tall shelves, same controlled silence, same structured order, but her perception of it had shifted completely. She carried the key she had found in her mother's book. It no longer felt like an object of curiosity. It felt like instruction waiting to be followed. Claire moved to the public sections first, pretending to browse, though her attention was fixed on areas she had never considered important before. A restricted archive entrance, previously irrelevant to her life, now stood out as the only place that seemed connected to her questions. When she used the key at a hidden access panel, a concealed mechanism responded beneath the surface. A portion of the wall shifted, revealing a restricted archive room that was not listed in any public system. Inside, the environment felt controlled and isolated. The air was colder, and the silence felt engineered rather than natural. Rows of sealed files lined the shelves, each labeled with coded identifiers instead of names. Claire moved deeper into the space, aware that what she was seeing did not belong to a normal public institution. This was structured storage for classified or sensitive material. She eventually found a file labeled with her mother's name, Elena Dawson. Beneath the name was a coded designation that had no public reference point. Claire opened the file carefully, unsure what she would find. Inside were references to government-linked research programs, internal monitoring systems, and identity classification records marked as altered or erased. Elena Dawson appeared repeatedly in the documentation, but never as an ordinary librarian. She was consistently categorized under structured codes, suggesting observation and controlled access. Claire continued reading and discovered surveillance logs spanning multiple years. Her mother had been tracked long before her death. Movements, patterns, and behavioral notes were recorded with precision. One classification appeared repeatedly: high-risk intellectual exposure. The information forced Claire to reconsider everything. Her mother had not been living a quiet, invisible life. She had been living under observation. The emotional weight of that realization shifted her understanding of grief into something more complex. It was no longer only loss. It was uncertainty about identity itself. While searching further, Claire discovered a second key hidden inside a hollow book spine. Attached to it was a transit code leading to a storage locker at a city station. She left the library without reporting her findings to anyone. The decision was not driven by impulse, but by a growing understanding that institutions might not provide answers if they were part of the system that created the secrecy. Outside, she noticed a figure standing across the street, still, watching, not moving toward her, but clearly aware of her presence. Claire continued walking without changing direction, carrying the new key and the weight of what she had just uncovered. Claire Dawson arrived at the transit station with the second key still warm in her hand, as if it had been designed to guide her rather than simply unlock something physical. The station was busy, but she moved through it with a focus that made the noise around her feel distant and unimportant. She located the assigned storage locker in a lower section of the facility, away from public traffic. The lock responded immediately when she inserted the key. A mechanical click confirmed what she already suspected. This was not random storage. It was intentional access. Inside the locker, she found a sealed folder and a compact flash drive placed carefully on top of it, as if whoever left it expected it to be discovered at exactly this moment. Claire paused before touching anything. For the first time, a thought formed that went beyond curiosity. It was a realization that her mother had not simply hidden information. She had prepared for a situation where she would no longer be alive to control how it was found. That understanding shifted something inside Claire. Grief no longer felt passive. It felt structured, as if it had been designed around missing pieces she was only now starting to see. She took the flash drive and inserted it into a secure device she had brought with her. The screen activated, revealing encrypted files and fragmented audio logs that required multiple layers of decoding. As she worked through the system, patterns began to emerge. Her mother, Elena Dawson, was not just a librarian. She had been working as an internal analyst within a covert oversight division tied to classified data monitoring. Claire read carefully, her focus tightening as each file revealed more structure behind her mother's life. Elena had been tracking illegal data transfers involving influential political figures and private sector contractors operating beyond legal visibility. One program name appeared repeatedly in the files: Project Holotrace. The deeper Claire explored, the more disturbing the pattern became. The program was not just about surveillance. It involved manipulation of digital identities, hidden observation of civilians, and unauthorized tracking systems that extended far beyond what the public understood. Claire began reinterpreting her memories of her mother: the late nights, the quiet behavior, the controlled distance from personal attachments. What once seemed like routine now looked like discipline shaped by secrecy. Inside the sealed folder, she found printed photographs. Unidentified men following Elena through public streets, transit points, and library routes. Every image suggested long-term monitoring. Another file contained a structured list of names. Each name was marked with a status indicator. Some were labeled contained. Others were marked pending removal. Near the bottom of the list, Claire saw something that made her pause longer than anything else. Elena Dawson's name was listed, marked not as observer, as target. The implication changed everything she believed about her mother's death. It was no longer consistent with illness or natural causes. The structure of the file suggested deliberate removal. Claire's emotional state shifted sharply. Grief no longer defined her response. It was replaced by something heavier and more focused. Anger shaped by clarity. Her mother had not simply died. She had been eliminated from a system she had been investigating. She continued decoding the remaining files with increasing urgency. A partially hidden directory revealed a set of coordinates embedded within encrypted metadata. When the system translated the final location, Claire froze. The coordinates pointed directly to her own apartment building. Claire Dawson left the transit station with the coordinates still burning in her mind, but the weight of what she had discovered made the city around her feel unfamiliar. Streets she had walked 100 times no longer felt ordinary. Every reflection in glass, every passing car, every paused stranger began to feel like something more deliberate. When she reached her apartment building, she slowed without meaning to. Nothing looked visibly different, yet her awareness had changed. The entrance, the windows, even the neighboring balconies felt like points of observation instead of simple architecture. She did not say it aloud, but the realization formed clearly inside her. Her mother's death was not an ending. It was a message. Inside her apartment, Claire locked the door and immediately checked every corner out of instinct she did not know she had developed. The silence inside the room felt different now, less safe and more temporary. The coordinates linking her own home to the final file replayed in her thoughts again and again. On the flash drive, new decrypted sections revealed more of Elena Dawson's role. She had not been acting alone. She was part of a structured internal whistle network operating quietly within the same system that monitored her. A small group of analysts and insiders had been collecting evidence about Project Holotrace, preparing to expose it through controlled leaks. The program itself was no longer just surveillance. It was a layered system designed to manipulate identity records, track civilian behavior without consent, and erase individuals from official existence when necessary. Claire's understanding of her mother deepened into something more complex. Elena had not been isolated. She had been part of resistance inside the system itself. But resistance inside a controlled structure always carried risk. Among the files, Claire noticed repeated references to a single authority figure, Director Kessler. The name appeared in approval logs, access overrides, and containment decisions. Every pathway of escalation seemed to converge around him. Claire studied the pattern longer than anything else. The consistency suggested control rather than coincidence. If Elena had been eliminated, it was not random. It followed authorization chains that pointed upward. Director Kessler was not just involved. He likely authorized a removal order. Later that evening, Claire noticed movement outside her apartment building. People who did not behave like residents. Individuals who stood too still in places that offered no reason to stand. Their presence was subtle, but consistent enough to register. She did not confront it. Instead, she began documenting everything: times, positions, patterns of movement. Her journalism training shifted from academic practice into survival habit. Observation became defense. With each passing hour, the feeling grew stronger. She was no longer outside the system. She was inside it, the same way her mother had been. Safety, once assumed, now felt conditional. Later that night, an envelope was slipped under her door, without a knock or sound. Inside was her mother's ring, placed carefully inside a small black box with no explanation attached. Claire held it for a long moment before opening it. Inside the box, beneath the ring, was a thin microchip already active. Her phone, placed beside her, lit up instantly. A tracking interface appeared on the screen. It displayed a live signal. It showed Claire's exact current location. Claire Dawson stared at the glowing map on her phone, watching the live tracking signal update in real time. It did not flicker or lag. It moved with her breathing, her position, her presence inside the room. The realization settled slowly at first. Then all at once, she was not looking at data anymore. She was the data being watched. The microchip from her mother's ring had confirmed it without leaving room for interpretation. Claire was actively being tracked. For a moment, everything she had believed about privacy collapsed into something hollow. Every step she had taken since her mother's death, every decision she thought was private, had likely already been recorded, analyzed, and stored somewhere she had never seen. The emotional impact did not come as panic. It came as silence, the kind that follows when a person realizes they were never outside the system to begin with. Claire did not contact authorities. The idea felt meaningless now, almost naive. The same system that had monitored her mother was still active, still structured, still reaching into her life without permission. Instead, she returned to the encrypted instructions hidden inside the flash drive. The file had updated silently, as if anticipating her next move. Coordinates and access codes guided her toward a location she had never considered important before, a private data center hidden beneath a corporate building in the financial district. When Claire arrived, the structure above ground looked ordinary. Glass, steel, clean corporate branding. Nothing suggested what existed beneath it. Inside, she accessed a maintenance route using the instructions embedded in Elena's data. The lower levels were colder, quieter, and heavily restricted. Security systems were present, but not openly visible. Everything felt designed to remain unseen rather than secure in a traditional sense. She eventually reached a hidden access point marked only with internal codes. The system responded to the sequence from a flash drive, confirming that Elena had been there before her. Security logs confirmed it. Elena Dawson had accessed restricted archives shortly before her death. The timing aligned too precisely to be coincidence. Claire followed the logs deeper, identifying offline storage units that had never been connected to public networks. Inside those isolated records, she found something she did not expect. Her own name, Claire Dawson, listed in surveillance files dated years before her mother's death. The implication hit her harder than anything so far. She had not been observed recently. She had been observed long, before she ever knew anything was wrong. Her life had been recorded quietly in the background of the system she had never been told existed. The realization did not feel like discovery. It felt like exposure. Her entire sense of independence began to fracture. Even her earliest memories now carried the possibility of unseen observation. Nothing about her life felt untouched anymore. A sudden sound interrupted her search. Movement somewhere deeper in the facility. Not mechanical, not automated. Human. Claire froze for only a moment before realizing she had already been noticed. Unknown agents entered the lower corridor ahead, forcing her to move quickly. She left the terminal without finishing the sequence and slipped into a nearby emergency maintenance passage. The corridor was narrow, unlit in sections, and designed for system access rather than escape. She ran until the footsteps behind her faded. Only when she finally stopped did she notice the system had already changed again. Her phone activated on its own. A recorded message began playing. It was her mother's voice. Calm, controlled, final. Elena Dawson had left a message for her daughter that was never meant to be heard in pieces, and it began with a statement that made Claire stop breathing. Claire was never meant to stay safe, only meant to continue the truth. Claire Dawson stood inside the emergency maintenance corridor long after her mother's recorded message ended. The silence that followed was heavier than before, as if the building itself had absorbed what she had just learned and was waiting for her reaction. When she finally reopened the flash drive's deepest encrypted layer, the system responded differently this time. It did not just unlock files. It expanded them, revealing a structured archive that had been hidden beneath multiple security shells. Project HoloTrace was no longer a name. It was a functioning system. The design was precise and disturbing. It was built not only to monitor individuals, but to erase them in layers, first digitally, then administratively, and finally socially. People did not simply disappear. They were rewritten out of existence before anyone realized they had been removed. Claire felt a slow, uncomfortable shift inside her as she read further. Ordinary individuals, journalists, analysts, witnesses, civilians, had been quietly stripped from records, their identities replaced, their histories altered, their existence reduced to gaps that no one questioned. The emotional weight of it did not arrive all at once. It built gradually, forming the realization that entire lives had been treated as editable data. Elena Dawson's files confirmed she had been tracking this system for years. She was not just observing it. She was mapping its structure, identifying where data was manipulated and where real-world actions followed digital edits. The program was not purely governmental. It was a hybrid network involving private contractors, intelligence-linked vendors, and administrative oversight channels that overlapped without clear accountability. Among the internal records, Claire found repeated references to Director Kessler, His authorization codes appeared across multiple operations, including containment decisions and disappearance approvals. The structure suggested coordination rather than isolated abuse. Claire now understood what her mother had discovered. Elena had uncovered not just corruption, but a system designed to prevent exposure by eliminating the people capable of proving it existed. Further decoding revealed something more personal. Elena had attempted to leak the information, not once, but through multiple staged exits. Each attempt had been intercepted before reaching public channels. The final log showed her realizing she was no longer safe within the system she worked inside. But instead of stopping, she changed strategy. Elena began leaving structured breadcrumbs specifically for Claire. Hidden access points, encoded keys, delayed triggers. Each discovery Claire had made was not random. It was a controlled path leading her deeper into the truth. Inside one encrypted folder, Claire found a list labeled Active Survivors Network. It contained a small number of names connected to Project HoloTrace. Some were marked as compromised. Others were marked as dormant. One entry stood out: Operational Contact, unconfirmed active. Claire studied it longer than the rest. This was not a victim list. It was a potential resistance channel still functioning inside the system. She began preparing to contact it, carefully routing through layered encryption protocols Elena had left behind. Outside the corridor, movement increased. Security sweeps had begun across the building. Claire could hear distant footsteps, scanning patterns, controlled searches. The system was no longer passive. It was reacting. She moved quickly, avoiding exposed areas, slipping through maintenance access routes as detection pressure increased. At one point, she narrowly avoided a patrol passing within meters of her position. Her breathing remained steady, but her awareness had sharpened into constant calculation. She was not just uncovering the truth anymore. She was being contained while doing it. Once she reached temporary safety, her device activated unexpectedly. A secure message appeared on the screen. No sender ID. Only one line. If you want the truth fully, meet me at the place your mother died. Claire Dawson arrived at St. Hargrove Medical Center just after midday, standing across the street for a moment longer than she intended. The building looked unchanged from the outside. Clean glass, structured entrances, steady movement of staff and visitors. But to her it no longer represented care. It represented the final point where everything had been rewritten. She crossed the street slowly, aware that every step felt heavier than the last. This was the place where Elena Dawson had died, and now it was the only place that still held answers no file had fully revealed. Inside, Claire requested access under the pretense of reviewing family records. The system processed her request with polite efficiency, but something about the response felt delayed, as if the request had been observed before it was approved. She began with hospital logs. What she found immediately created a contradiction. Elena Dawson was not officially admitted through emergency intake. There was no standard arrival record, no paramedic entry log, and no verified transfer documentation. Yet she had died here. The inconsistency was not accidental. It was structured. Claire moved to internal surveillance archives. The footage existed, but timestamps were inconsistent. Certain segments had been altered or replaced with neutral static overlays. Movement patterns did not align with recorded medical activity. Time itself had been adjusted to remove gaps. The emotional tension built quietly inside her as she realized the hospital was not just a place where her mother had died. It was a controlled environment where her death had been processed. While reviewing restricted files, Claire was approached by a man who did not appear on any staff roster. He observed her for a moment before speaking in controlled terms, confirming he had once been indirectly connected to Elena's internal work. He did not offer comfort. He offered structure. Elena Dawson had not arrived at the hospital as a normal patient. She had been brought in already targeted. Her condition had not been the cause of death. It had been the final stage of containment. According to him, Elena was carrying critical evidence at the time of her arrival, not fragments, not notes. Final consolidated proof of Project HoloTrace's highest-level operations. That proof was never recovered. Claire felt the weight of that absence immediately. It meant her mother had not only been silenced, but stripped of what she had worked to protect. Determined, Claire moved into the hospital's restricted maintenance zones. The corridors beneath the building were older, colder, and less maintained. Here, systems did not operate for comfort. They operated for function. She followed a path indicated in Elena's final activity logs, each step aligning with movements recorded hours before her death. It became clear Elena had intentionally led something here, not just information, a sequence. Claire eventually found a sealed compartment embedded within a medical storage structure. It was not part of standard infrastructure. It was hidden within the system itself, requiring layered access and physical proximity to unlock. As she approached it, she understood something she had not fully accepted until now. Her mother had chosen this location, not as a place of death, but as a point of transfer. At that exact moment, security systems began to activate across the hospital. Subtle at first, restricted access alerts, corridor lockdown indicators, silent system overrides. The building was beginning to close around her. Claire ignored it and forced access to the compartment. Inside, she found a final encrypted drive, and on its label, written in Elena Dawson's handwriting, was a name that made her stop completely. Claire Dawson. Claire Dawson stood inside the sealed hospital compartment with a final, encrypted drive in her hand, realizing the truth was no longer something she was searching for. It was something that had been prepared for her. The air felt tighter in the restricted space, as if the building itself was aware of what she was about to uncover. She combined the access keys she had gathered over time, matching codes from the flash drive, the transit locker, and the hidden hospital sequence. The system responded immediately, not with resistance, but with recognition, as though it had been waiting for this exact moment to activate. The files opened. What appeared was not just a continuation of Project Holotrace. It was its core structure. Claire saw names, operations, and hierarchy levels that extended far beyond anything she had previously accessed. At the highest tier of the system, there were individuals responsible not only for surveillance, but for authorization of removal protocols that determined who remained in existence and who did not. Then the truth shifted again. Elena Dawson was not only a whistleblower inside the system. She had also been operating as a controlled double agent, feeding structured misinformation upward while secretly preserving classified evidence for controlled release. Claire's breath slowed as she processed what that meant. Her mother had not simply been fighting the system from the outside. She had been embedded within it, navigating both sides at once. The emotional realization settled heavily. Elena had erased Claire from classified risk profiles intentionally. It was not accidental protection. It was strategic removal. Claire had been made invisible to the system that tracked everyone else. But invisibility was temporary. Exposure risk had eventually caught up with Elena. Further files revealed Director Kessler's involvement at a level deeper than expected. He had authorized elimination protocols, but internal logs showed hesitation around Elena specifically, not because she was unknown, but because her backup system was already in motion before her death. Elena had anticipated removal, and she had ensured Claire would inherit everything only after she was gone. That realization changed something fundamental inside Claire. The grief she had carried since the funeral was no longer only loss. It was structured intention. Her mother had chosen the timing of truth, even knowing it would cost her life. At the deepest level of the system, Claire found a final classification update. Her name was no longer just observed. It was now marked as a successor threat. The system had fully acknowledged her existence as continuation of Elena's work. Claire understood what that meant immediately. She was no longer outside the conflict. She was now the primary target of the same network that had controlled her mother's life and death. For a moment, she did not move. The weight of everything she had discovered pressed down on her at once. But instead of retreating, something shifted in her response. Grief did not disappear. It transformed into direction. Claire made her decision. She would not run. She would continue what her mother had started, using the secured system. She began uploading the encrypted files, preparing to release the evidence beyond a controlled network. The process triggered silent alerts across multiple systems she could not see. The informant from the hospital had warned her that this moment would come, that releasing the truth would not make her safe. It would make her visible in the same way Elena had once become visible. But Claire did not stop. She finalized the upload. Every screen connected to the network flickered at once. Then, across every device linked to the system, a single message appeared. We are aware you are now the holder of her secret.